Good morning and welcome back to our second and final day of REAL's virtual reentry conference. I thank everyone for being a part of this conference, but I also want to thank you for your commitment to serve within the reentry community. Reentry is a word we use to identify the process a person goes through as they return to the community from incarceration. Yet, for 95% of the thousands incarcerated today in Louisiana, reentry will be just their first step. For them to be fully reintegrated into our communities, their other steps must be ones taken together with the reentry community as a whole. Reintegration is the result of the effective working relationship between the individual and the reentry community. Recidivism is what happens when the reentry community and the individual returning from incarceration fail to establish an effective relationship with each other. This is why Reentry Alliance for Louisiana is so critical, important as we conduct our continued reentry efforts. Our statewide reentry community is vast and impressive, yet we don't want to take for granted that we know each other and we know what services we have to offer those returning from incarceration. Also, we want to make sure that the services we provide will produce the outcomes we hope to achieve. REAL, through the conferences held the last 6 years, has worked to bring all of us together so that we can, in many cases, put names to faces. And in some cases, meet and learn about new programs and organizations located sometimes right around the corner. Through our interactions, we learn about things that work and make our efforts more effective. We also learn about strategies that can help make our organization stronger. Lastly, but not any less important, we can learn ways to keep the doors open, to keep the money flowing. All of this working together produces success stories like those you've heard during our first day's presentations. Each of these success stories will slowly sometimes, but surely chip away at the stigma connected to those that have been touched by the criminal justice system. And so at this time, I'd like to have the pleasure of introducing another real success story. Help me welcome to our virtual stage our first plenary speaker for today, Jonesboro native and the first African American to serve as mayor of Jonesboro, the Honorable Leslie Thompson.
Thank you, Jane. I am so excited to be here this morning. I want to say good morning to all of the conference attendees. Of course, as always, before I speak to talk, I like to give honor to my Lord and Savior. I depend upon Him to provide for me. Even this morning, I'm certainly going to be calling upon Him to stay with me throughout this 45 minutes or so that I'm going to be speaking with you. I'm thankful for the opportunity. Always thankful for the opportunity to be able to share my story. And I was listening to Mr. James as he was talking about the reentry. I just happen to have a lot of firsthand experience with our criminal justice system. I have firsthand experience with our reentry program. It's like my grandmother used to tell me all the time. She would say that if you're a Christian, then you ought to have a testimony. I have a testimony. I have gone through some things that I'd like to share with you today, and I hope that you will consider them to be relevant, maybe that someone might be blessed as a result of something that they may hear. I must admit, though, that I have just recently become aware of who you guys are. The Nonprofit Alliance. I was very intrigued by your mission statement. But before I go any further, I guess I would like to say a couple of things about myself. I am the mayor of a town in north central Louisiana, one of the largest towns in the state, I guess you might say, in the northern part of the state. And the name of the town is Jonesboro, Louisiana. I'm also a 1980 graduate of Southern University, where I received my degree in political science that kind of helped to springboard me into what I'm doing today. I also did a couple of years at Atlanta University as I studied in the area of a master's African American studies. I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background. I am from Louisiana. I call it a state that actually gave birth to the concept of mass incarceration. Now, on January 1st, 2007, I was elected to serve as this town's first African American mayor. That was since its inception. The town was founded in 1901. January 1st, 2011, I was reelected to serve a second term. It was during that time and during that term that I was accused, charged, and convicted by an all-white jury of 3 counts of malfeasance in office. Later, I was charged with what they call usurpation of the authority of an elected official, where I was then jailed without bail. I was subsequently sentenced to what I consider to be a 16-year sentence, in that 3 years, I received 3 years for count 1. I received 3 years for count 2, of course, to run consecutively, not concurrently. And then I was also given a 5-year sentence for the third offense, where that sentence was suspended, but then giving me another 5 years to serve on probation, with then a restitution of $53,000 to be paid back to society. Now, so by some, I'm still considered to be an ex-offender. By some, I'm still considered to be an ex-con. And I wanted for you to know that about me before I got started today. I wanted to talk to you a little bit from the perspective of being a mayor, then a little bit from the perspective of being a Louisianian, and then third, from having served time in DOC. I think that's important for you to know so that you'll be able to better understand my frame of reference. Most of what I'm going to say today, I will go on and disclaim at this point that is pretty much subjective, just based upon my composite accumulation of the totality of my life experiences. As a matter of fact, that's all I think we all are. We're just who we are based upon our experiences. Now, having said that, it's not so that you might judge what I say to determine whether you think it's correct or incorrect. It's not to see if it's wrong or if you think it's right. It's just my perspective from where I sit. Now, in an effort to better familiarize myself with you and who you were, I took a look at your mission statement. I was very impressed with your mission statement, whereas it says that it is to educate Louisiana. Louisiana is to, let me go back to educate Louisiana citizens on every aspect of reentry, to disseminate accurate information to all involved in reentry, and to support regional coalition of service providers for returning citizens, ultimately improving the public safety and the economy of Louisiana. And I want to just say that I'm very, very proud to know, glad to know that there are many individuals, companies, agencies, nonprofits, service providers out there who are just as concerned about our fellow inmates and their well-being as I am. Some of you may be asking yourself that if he was given 16 years, and I was, and he was actually just sentenced in the year 2013, how is it that he's back? How is it that he is serving again in the capacity that he left? How is it that he became mayor again, having gone through what he has gone through? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me talk to you a little bit about that. First, let's talk about me as a mayor, as a Black elected official in America. I'm often confronted with the question, am I an African American who happens to be a mayor, or am I a mayor who just happens to be an African American? I think that every Black elected official, be it that you're elected or appointed, should ask yourself that question. And the answers will determine and justify your agenda priorities. When we discuss America, when we discuss America's reentry program and the country's criminal justice system, I don't think that we can do it void of discussing the systemic racism aspect of the system as a whole. We know that 40% of all arrests on a daily basis is of young African American men. And you might ask yourself the question, how can that be when these young African American men come from a pool or a group of folk who only make up 13 to 14% of the country's total population? Again, we're talking about the systemic aspect of the racist aspect of the system. As Black elected officials, it is incumbent upon us to do more. We are to do more to assist and to insist that America lives up to her founding principles, especially those like liberty, equality, and justice for all. I believe that as Black elected officials that we have actually failed our communities. This system that we call criminal justice has been created actually on our watch without any to little resistance on our part. The systemic racism aspect of the system can be found in every phase of the system, from police profiling to the arrest, to the processing, through the court system, the prisons, and even the exit that we now call or refer to as reentry. The entire system is riddled with systemic racism. It has been my experience that we as Black elected officials, once we are elected to a position of influence and could have some impact on policy creation and policy implementation, we generally then become more concerned with the notion of what I call job longevity, or the desire for longevity in that position, which usually calls for what I call system assimilation. Our actions or behavior began to cater to that of or to gain the approval of our counterparts, as opposed to continuing to raise and to wave the banner for the need for change. I spoke with a young Black lady the other day who is running for a position in my parish. She's running for the position of judge. And I said to her, I said, I cannot support you just because you're Black. And I would hope that you would not ever support me just because I'm Black. I said, because that has not seemingly benefited us as a people over the years. And what I mean by that is, in Louisiana, we have, let's just take the judgeship for an example. We have more Black judges per capita in the state of Louisiana than any other state in our country. But we also still have more Blacks incarcerated than any other state in our union. We also have more Blacks who are doing longer stretches of time for the same crimes that are committed by our counterpart. So sometimes just to have us in position does not seem to benefit us greatly. So what I'm saying is that we live in a day where we need an agenda. We need an agenda for change, and where we need accountability regardless of the office holder's ethnicity. You can be any color you come as, but we need accountability to the office holder to be able to help to bring about the changes that we know that we so desperately need. So I challenge the Black elected officials. Many of our villages, our towns, our cities are not governed by Black mayors, and many of them have majority minority councils. So our destiny now is really in our own hand. Should you this day, so I say you should choose this day as to the direction and the path that you should carve out for the direction for your municipality. Now, as a Louisianian, it's important, I think, that we understand and know where we are, that we understand our frame of reference as it relates to this part of the country. I want to just point out a few facts about the state of Louisiana as it relates to our criminal justice system. We know that Louisiana is considered to be the world's prison capital. We know that the state prisoners that the state imprisons more of its people per capita than any other states in the country. We know that Louisiana incarceration rate is nearly triple that of Iran. We know that it's nearly 7 times that of China and 10 times that of Germany. Keep in mind that what I'm talking to you about is a state, one state, in comparison to other countries. This is who we are. We know that 1 in 86 Louisiana adults is in prison system, which is nearly double the national average. We know that more than 50% of Louisiana inmates are in local prisons, and the national average is only 5%. We know that Louisiana spends less on local inmates than any other state. We know that Louisiana spends less on local inmates, and we know that nearly 2/3 of our Louisiana prisoners are actually non-violent offenders. The national average is less than 1/2. Over 1 million blacks are in local jails or in state prisons across the United States. 1 in every 15 black men is incarcerated in U.S. prisons. 1 in every 3 African Americans will serve time in prison unless these trends should change. So I say to you, before there can be real change in our criminal justice system, including reentry, there must first be a commitment to change on the part of the state herself. The culture of the system cannot change unless the creator of the system opts to change. The service providers can find housing for a few inmates. They can even help with gainful employment of a lot of the individuals who come out of the prison, but not until Louisiana sits down at the table and presents her plan for real change will real change be realized. As an ex-offender, my perspective is not what I heard about. My perspective of the system is what I lived. It's one thing to walk upon a person who says that I know Jesus Christ and I read about him. I read about him but I've really never had any experience. But what I'm about to say to you now is based upon a real intimate relationship with the system itself. And I'll say something else about the South, and it is that we are generally more spiritual, have more spiritual ties than most folk, is what I've found in other parts of the country. I jotted this down before I move into the next part of this material. I said we learn to trust in His timing. Talking about the God that we serve, we learn to rely on His promises. We learn to wait for His answers. We learn to believe in His miracles. We learn to rejoice in His goodness and relax in His presence. Now, I preface my testimony with that because even though I was falsely accused and knew that I was innocent, I had to trust that while God allowed it, that there must have been a divine purpose and that He would somehow be glorified in the process. So my mind instantly shifted away from the question, why me? Because we generally have a tendency that when things bad happen to us, the first thing we want to do is ask, why me? Well, that I had to totally dismiss, and I had to dismiss that pretty quickly. And then my mind shifted to to begin to thank God for finding me worthy for such a test. For whatever he had for me to learn, for whatever I had to go through, it was by his design, and I had to embrace it. And it wasn't until the night of my release, after being in that prison for 2 years, it was the night of my release that he revealed to himself my purpose. He said, and his spirit revealed to me, that I selected you as a child for this mission. He said, I allowed you to serve in parish government for 15 years. He said, I allowed you to become the first Black mayor of Jonesboro. He said, it was not by your doing. He said, I allowed you to become the vice president at large for the organization that we know as LMA, or the Louisiana Municipal Association. He said, I allowed for you to be able to visit the governor's mansion whenever you wanted to give the governor a call and to just go down and sit down and talk with him about what your community needed. He said, I needed someone with compassion for his people who I could send inside, and they would be able to see where their fathers were, where their brothers were, where their uncles were. He said, I needed to someone to go in to see this system, or this rebuilt system of slavery, because that's in essence what it had become and what it has become, what it is now. Now, I need for you, he said to me, to be able to go back out into mainstream and to articulate what you have seen. He said, yes, as it was with Moses, even though you grew up in Pharaoh's house, you never forgot that you were not an Egyptian. He said, you always remembered that you were in fact a Hebrew. He said, so you will be able to go back into mainstream and to articulate what you've seen in a way that they will understand. For you know the customs of Pharaoh. And he said, so go and tell Pharaoh that it's time for him to let my people go. Now, let's talk a little bit about the system. Among citizens in the United States, there is a widely held fundamental belief that the criminal justice system exists to protect law-abiding citizens, and that when the system errs, it errs on the side of leniency to the guilty, rather than deliberate prosecution of the innocent. Most of us believe in this premise, as surely as we believe that a person must be considered innocent until he is proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That double jeopardy prevents anyone from being tried over and over again for the same crime. And that once a debt has been paid, that debt is paid in full. Well, I can tell you that these may be true in theory, but in practice, the opposite quite often occurs. I can tell you that there was no basis for the conviction of mine. I can tell you that it was a situation that we could not quite wrap our head around to try to understand. But when I got into the system, I was able to better understand. Going into the prison system, they put me in what most of us call the hole. I was placed in a place, never having been in trouble with the law in my life. And at 55 years of age, they put me in a place where 80% of the inmates surrounding me were doing life, double life, and triple life sentences. This was a very, very uncomfortable situation. But again, it was one, again, as I said earlier, that was directed by God. While I was in the hole for over a month, and a hole is just a place where you are in segregation, where you're separated from other prisoners. You're in a place by yourself, by your lonesome, for as long as they want you to be. But it was during that time that I had an opportunity to spend some time with God. It was during that time I was fortunate enough to have brought 2 books into the prison system with me. One was the King James Version of the Bible, and the other was the Louisiana Criminal Code. Those were the two books that I found that I was really going to need. As I started to research, started to seek out information, getting the law clerk to bring me information while I was there in the hole, there was information and things that were shown to me by God that would help me to get out of the situation. First, I had to understand that I was not the first to go through an ordeal like this. And I had to understand that I had to also find a way to forgive those who had done this thing to me. That's important. And I'm talking about the experiences of an inmate. I'm talking about the process from coming into the system. I'm talking about the process as we leave the system, and I'll eventually talk some more about reentry of the system, into the system. While I was in the hole, I was able to do research, and I think that that's a lot of what we don't do when we find ourselves in a situation like that, is start to spend time academically to find a way out. I was looking at statutes, I was looking at law cases, and what God gave me was what I call Jesus paradise. That's what the words came to. That's what the letter of the areas that I was researching came to, was Jesus paradise. Now I'm going to try to be very, very brief with this, so as not to have to go into what each of the areas meant. But the J in Jesus stood for joinder. I found that while I was in the prison system, that through Louisiana law, there is a statute called joinder, which says that you cannot give an inmate consecutive sentences when the crime that he's been charged with are actually like conduct. Well, that came to be very, very helpful to me as time went on. The second letter is E. The E stood for effectiveness of counsel. And if there are inmates out there, if there are people out there who are family, friends, or folk that are inside of the system, it may be good for you to take some notes about these areas that I was able to utilize research to bring myself out. The E stood for effectiveness of counsel. You want to be able to look to make sure that your counsel did a great job, or did at least an adequate job, so that if there are grounds that you need to appeal, that may become one. The S stood for excessive sentence. Excessive sentence. You are protected by the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. That amendment protects you from being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. That became very important as I moved forward. The S in Jesus stood for sufficiency of evidence. So you want to make sure that the evidence was adequate for them to convict, and if not, again, that gives you ground for appeal. The P in the word paradise stood for pretrial and trial errors. Another great area to look at when you are trying to bring yourself or free yourself from a system that is designed to never let you go. The A in paradise stood for adjudication by biased judge. Now, these were areas that impacted me. There may be other areas, and I'm sure there will be, depending on your particular situation. My situation just called for me to look at these areas. The A for adjudication by a biased judge became very important as I continued to research. The R in paradise stood for right to guilty verdict beyond a reasonable doubt. These are areas that are very essential. The A in paradise stood for admission of improper evidence. The D stood for due process violations. And believe me, if you know your rights, I just happen to have been a paralegal going in, so I had some background in the area, and I didn't have a fear of law. I understood it quite well. The A, the D for due process violation, the I in paradise stood for inconsistent verdict. when the evidence is inconsistent with the verdict. S in Paradise stood for selective prosecution, and the E stood for exclusion of jury members of defendant's race. All these things became very, very useful tools for me in order to be able to bring myself out and back into mainstream society. Now, going into the system as an innocent man and knowing that I was innocent and getting there and realizing that the statistics say that about 10% of all incarceratees are in fact innocent. And that's a staggering number when you look at the total number of prisoners that we have across the country. I had a choice, though, to go in and to do my time and to find a way to re-enter into society based upon society's term. Or I could go in and fight like hell for my innocence and reclaim my position that had been taken from me. Well, I chose the latter. I chose to fight hard. I visited the law library at every opportunity that I got. I submitted a writ to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in Shreveport, Louisiana, from the prison. And that writ dealt with the claim of the Eighth Amendment protection constitutional right, where I was claiming that I was actually that I had been subjected to cruel and unusual punishment, and that there was no way that I should have been given 16 years. Well, lo and behold, the higher court concurred. The higher court concurred, and they vacated my sentence. That was the first key, and that was the first step toward my release. However, your sentence is just your sentence and can be reconsidered, revisited. I knew that I had to go beyond just the sentence. I knew that I had to look at the actual conviction itself. And so what I did, I studied, researched, and I created a draft that I was able to submit to the Supreme Court, the Louisiana Supreme Court. This was based on the convictions, and lo and behold, the Supreme Court concurred. They vacated all convictions on due to what they call prosecutorial misconduct and a lack of evidence on two. So that brought me home. And so now I want you to know that leaving the Supreme Court, I got a telephone call from a friend of mine who happens to be an attorney, who said to me, he said, "Thompson, is that your name on the docket of the Supreme Court?" And I said, "Yes, that's me." He said, "Are you aware that 95% of all cases submitted to the Supreme Court are rejected due to a lack of merit?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." He said, "Then are you aware that of the 5% that they do hear, that only 2% actually get to go inside of the courtroom, the Supreme Court, for oral argument?" I said to him, "No, I was not aware of that." He said, "And of the 2% that goes in, do you know that less than a fraction of 1% is actually overturned?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." And I said, "And I'm glad I didn't know, because I would have then been mobulated with the facts of the world when God has simply said to me that he was going to vindicate me, and I stood on his word." So that's how I came home. Even though my sentence had been vacated, the system still subjected me to 2 years of parole. And this is where my experience with reentry comes. Even though I knew that the system should not have been able to continue to allow me to have to come in to check with parole officers, to do all the things that are required by a parolee, my sentence has been vacated. But I didn't choose to fight it, because I realized early on that if God had allowed me to go through this, evidently he intended for me to go through the process in its entirety. Now, so that when I talk to my brothers and sisters who are finding themselves dealing with the same fate, that they would be able to talk with me about what the system is versus what it should be. Talk to me about how to deal with the system as it relates to every part of that system. Having gone through this phase gave me a great appreciation for the reentry phase. They enter, I'm talking about inmates now, they enter into a separate society coming into reentry, a world hidden from public view, governed by a set of oppressive and discriminatory rules and regulation laws that do not apply to anybody but them. They are subjected to housing discrimination due to the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988 and the Quality Housing and Work Responsibility Act of 1998. Now, putting this in perspective, it's important to know that more than 650,000 inmates are released from prison each year and find it near impossible to find housing and sometimes employment. Now, we know that now there are roughly 65 million people who have criminal records in this country. And I want to also say that 40 of the 50 states require parolees to maintain gainful employment. For most people coming out of prison, a prison conviction adds to their already problematic profile. About 70% of offenders and ex-offenders are high school dropouts. And according to at least one study, half of them are functionally illiterate. But I thought it was one thing that was very, very impressive. One fact that I would like to share with you when I was reading the book called The New Jim Crow. Michelle Alexander, I think her name was, the author, and she pointed out that now, in this day and time, 70% of all that represents the rate of recidivism of those going back into the system, they go back now due to violations of the stringent new rules and regs that are heaped upon them by the system itself. So these people are not going back to prison because they have created new crimes, but the system has an interest, a financial interest of seeing you back inside. So we have to be very, very careful and discuss this issue with parolees to make sure that they are able to maintain and to avoid those violations that would send them back into the prison system. So I decided today to come to speak primarily just to be, because I decided to be a face of what a successful reentry product looks like. One who have actually gone into the system and has had to experience every aspect of the system that any one of you would have to experience. No, it's not just because I'm the mayor. No, it's not because I was the mayor. No, it's not because I had a degree. It's not because I had a background in law or paralelism. I had to go through the exact same experiences that you have to go through. And hopefully I could be an inspiration. I wanted to be an inspiration for someone who finds himself now coming across that threshold from incarceration back into mainstream society. I wanted you to be able to say that if he could do it, I too can do it. And I'm here to let you know that you certainly can. When I think of reentry, I think that reentry deals more with the mental state of being. It's a mental reconditioning of an incarceratee who returns to a place of normalcy. See, there's nothing normal about an individual being locked down and caged like an animal for years at a time. There's nothing, absolutely nothing humane about that. The human being was never designed to be subjected to that kind of inhumane treatment. So there is a reconditioning process that he has to go through in order to find himself and to get himself back on track. The parolee must be taught to believe in himself. He must be taught that he can never advance beyond the point that he sees himself in his own mind. That's where the real teaching comes in. We have a lot of programs that address a lot of issues, but a lot of the issue deals with the individual and how he or she sees himself. And so once he realizes that when I came out, I would go and speak at certain forums, and I would wear my prison attire. I would actually wear my DOC number on my back, because I wanted for folk who had been down the same road to realize and understand that you don't have to wear that as a badge of inferiority. That's what society would like for you to do. That's how they would like for you to see yourself. They would like for you to believe that you cannot find a job. They would like for you to believe that nobody's going to hire you. They would like for you to believe that housing is going to be impossible. They would like for you to believe that you would not be able to protect and to take care of your family. But these things are not true. You can do whatever you choose to do. Give you an example. When I came out of the prison system, I went directly to Grambling State University. Didn't want any idle time on my hand. Enrolled in their criminal justice department as a student. Within the 2 years that I was on parole and probation, actually just parole, I received my master's degree in criminal justice from Grambling State University during that period of time. All I'm saying is you decide what you're going to do with your time. You decide whether it's going to be idle or whether it's going to be constructive. And you will make the difference, and you can do whatever you want to do. Now, it's not about accepting the label, is what I was just said. This is a choice that has to be made by the individual before he can truly be considered free. Now, as I get ready to close today, and I'm not sure where I am on my time, but as I get ready to wrap up, I want you to know that I was fortunate when I went into the prison system to have a wife who was very, very supportive, who stayed by my side. Her name was Yoshi. Her name is Yoshi. Now, Yoshi, we decided, my wife and I, to come together to form a nonprofit. We're still in the preliminary stages, but we've gotten pretty far down the line. We named this organization Yoshi. And what Yoshi stands for is Young Organized Servants Helping Inmates. We came out with a zeal to want to see the inmate become productive citizens, and we want to do everything that we can to make that possible. Now, my mission, our mission statement, is what I will end on. Our mission statement is to provide national hotline, which serves as a directory for where inmate services can be found. Having been on the inside, I know how important that can be. You're lost, you don't know where to call, you don't know who to call. We want to be that source. Number two, to create support group for felons, parolees, probationers, and their families. Because we got a chance to understand and realize that when an individual is in prison, his entire immediate family is in prison with him. There's a need for there to be support group so that they may be able to understand what the inmate is going through and to provide that help that the family needs as well. Number three, strengthen local communities, both politically and socially, by providing educational programs directed to teaching self-awareness and system confrontational techniques to help youth and adults avoid system conflict. That's very important. Number four, to raise community awareness about the system of incarceration. I won't elaborate, I'll just read because we have about 4 more to go. Number five, to raise the awareness of lawmakers in areas of law and policies that need to be revisited and modified. Number six, and by the way, I've made a trip or two to the governor's office since I've been out in an effort to try to do just that. Number six, to assist felons with transitional process as they re-enter society, thus reducing the rate of recidivism. And I understand that there are a lot of you out there who are members of this alliance who are doing just that very thing. And I hope that Yoshi will be able to join hands with you to assist in that effort. Also, to provide what I call ATF, I call it ATF, it's after the fact, because once you have been convicted, be it that you're innocent or that you are guilty, we want to be able to help to provide post-conviction relief assistance when possible, because you have 2 years. Once you are arrested and within the system, you have 2 years before the statute of limitation runs out, where there is no further ability on your part to fight for your release or your freedom. So during that first 2 years, I advise all inmates, all prisoners who go in, don't spend your time reading and watching Jerry Springer show. Take that 2-year period of time to find the areas, the loopholes that you might be able to use for your benefit to be able to release yourself or to get out of the state of incarceration. Number 8, assist inmates and their families to better understand the process of incarceration. Again, that's super, super important, because as I said earlier, the family goes through the same thing, if not worse sometimes, as the incarceratee. And I'll just say, I'll wrap it up here and say that if you are a felon, or if you're a family member of a felon, or if you're an associate of a felon, or just one who cares about the community impact of mass incarceration, Yoshi invites you to become a member of our organization. We will have this organization up and going, I would say, within the next 90 days. And I solicit the help from this organization, this alliance, because I understand that you do some work along those lines in assisting individuals to get their nonprofits up and off the ground. I don't know if I have spoken for an hour. I don't think I have. But I do want to thank this organization for allowing me the opportunity to share my story. And hopefully, as a result of what I've had to say, that there are people now who are going in or who are a part of the system who have now been given some hope. There is hope that when you come out, you can go on to get your master's degree. You can go on to get your doctor's degree. You can become an integral part of the society again. As soon as the position of mayor that I held before I left came up and available, I submitted my name, and thanks be to God, he showed favor. The people believed in me. And again, I'm back here doing what I do, which is helping my people to be able to have access to the resources that they need to be able to have an enhanced quality of life. So on that note, I will say I am signing off. And James, if you can hear me, Jaleesa, you can sign back in. Thank you again for your time. And I hope I've said something that will be beneficial and helpful to someone listening. Thank you very much for the time.